Peter will read first. Peter has published in the American Voice, Carolina Quarterly, Mid-American Review, Kansas Quarterly, Confrontation, Fiction, the New York Times Book Review, the Chicago Tribune. His chapter on essay memoir appears in the Portable MFA. He is taught at New York University, Sarah Lawrence College, and many other places, including a year as nonfiction writer in residence at Central Connecticut State University. He currently teaches in the online graduate program in National University, and of course, at the Hudson Valley Writers Center, where he has many beloved students who keep coming back time and time again to study with him. Please, all of you, help me welcome Peter Bricklebank.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Oh, you can't tell me. I'm going to assume you can. So I'm going to read some extracts from a piece that I'm working on. It's rather long. It's a kind of mosaic essay. And I don't really know how you read a mosaic essay because it has various threads drifting through it. So I'm just going to read 3 or 4 sections from it, just so you can get a taste of it. And just to set that up, one of the sections, one thread, I guess, would be something like travel. Another one deals with my my elder 80-year-old brother in England. Another piece deals with my partner's unfortunate experience of finding herself in the therapy group from hell. And the last one will just hopefully wrap it up. It's the voice will address you, my partner, through this. So that will be in the 4th piece. And it comes from, the idea from this comes from a quote from Rebecca Solnit. And if I can just that a little bit, she said this: "Writing is saying to no one and to everyone the things it is not possible to say to someone. Matters that are so subtle, so personal, so obscure that I ordinarily can't imagine saying them to the people I'm closest. Every once in a while, I try to say them aloud and find that what turns to mush in my mouth or falls short of their ears can be written down for total strangers." And that's what I'm trying to do here. You want a safari where a whole lot of baggage, presumed necessary, is carried into the middle of nowhere safe in order to kill something, in order to admire it or oneself. Nowadays, the bloodlust of killing is replaced by pointing and clicking and presumably orgasmic chatter, where you see lions, but not tigers and bears, and they're, wow, elephants, giraffe, gazelle, ibex, eland. I avidly collected the animal cards that came in tea packets as a cub. I am driven out of my non-safari reveries the way the lions were drummed out of the savanna grasses, with a lot of noisy enthusiasm and fervor, to a panoramic website. It's a landscape of the iconic, umbrella-ish, thorn, acacia, close to immortal, baobabs, zebras, cheetahs and hippos. The tour guides look handsome and confident and protective in their bush hats and specially converted Range Rovers and Jeeps. They know where the animals can be found and observed to the point of botheration. Presumably you would have hats. I like the hats. I mow our grass upstate in something not quite as ruggedly fetching. And the lodges, I am shown literature that has somehow appeared in our mail, glossy with adventuresome couples, and not mud huts. Verandas, fans, shades, breathless vistas. You're not hot while at camp. There's air conditioning. The rooms hospital tight and tasteful, Kente cloth bedspreads, local folk art. I'm led to believe it's romantic, also authentic and unique. Food especially prepared, a taste treat, as you were wont to say. Authentic food, apparently, though I doubt we'll eat with our hands. They have great vegetarian with an exclamation point. Gibbons, rhinos. There are 53 different African countries. We're not sure which has what animals. You have a home base, you go out on trips. You eat dinner like thoughtful baboons. of watching the sunset. They're heartbreakingly sanguinatory, the setting suns, like a bloodied yolk blobbed viscously slowly from shell to griddle. So, not Washington Heights, but the same exhausted sun. There's no mention of insects, but everyone has adequate netting. Pink flamingos, we're not sure. That might be another tour that takes in a lake. But lots of birds beyond the little brown jobs of our dowdier life. Storks, or is it ibex? That can't be right. Ibis. That might be the lake again. Vultures and lions, all the wildlife in zoos that thrilled us as children in their torpor, synoptides of our upcoming adulthood. The rooms, the beds beyond comfortable, romantic, uniquely authentic. Just the two of us, a primate pair. There would be other live, cool couples to talk to or avoid. We'd be seeing something before it disappears, and we need to do it now before we're too decrepit, before we do. So, now or never. You are girlishly enthusiastic. I don't want to go. I'm going to have to finesse this. I can't remember my African snakes. If they don't give a poisonous bite, I recall images from boys' adventure stories in which they coil around and crush leopards, pythons, boa constrictors. Got to be insects, some millipede or cockroach the size of a forearm. The mosquitoes surely can give you dengue fever or malaria. Imagine bouncing across a hard country along the paths less traveled, a road you must not take, through your most fearful, unimagined, primeval routes with smug, armed guys you don't know, deep into the dark heart of your own incomprehension. I'm just saying. Where the mind goes frightens me most. How can I say in a nice way, I want every privileged pith-helmeted bwana to get eaten? The notion of seeing the animals before they're extinct sickens me. I don't want to go to the deepest, darkest continent of the imagination to read, even though you reassure me I still have time in the evenings. Much appreciate the thought, though. Maybe there are nice ways to say all this in Swahili or Hausa or Igbo, but they're eluding me in the thought of what images of the self would ripple through the rising waves of tropical heat. My brother Michael tells me he bought books, a cookbook, the sophistications of which I expect will defeat him at the ingredients, and a manual on drawing. He's brought Xerox paper from a local store, the fancy art store, he tells me. He knows where it is when I start to tell him where. Has proper paper, but it's too expensive. He'll start with what he's got. I encourage him. Drawing takes time. He has plenty. It is something he can do inside. It's surely absorbing. He draws well. It will keep him safe. I remind him he drew me a dinosaur once. There is an allure for us both in the fantastical. We've talked about what he watches on television, shows that sensationalize cryptic marks on trees, crop circles, eviscerated cattle, and suppositions of secrecy around recovered alien spacecraft. We were always captivated by the myth of Loch Ness. We'd seen the grainy image of the long-necked shadow in the water, heard the story of the Scot on a bicycle, seeing the creature cross his path some moonlit night and falling off. We'd thrilled to the idea of a big white yeti, an adorably, awesomely abominable snowman in far-off snow-capped mountains. In our lifetimes, it seemed yetis had morphed and multiplied, like the sightings, into Sasquatches and Bigfoots. I was attacked by a Sasquatch on my morning walk, I tell him, cheerily reaching for the reel. Something had howled as I passed a mailbox. A man came running breathlessly. He was really sheepish when I asked the name of what he'd restrained. Sasquatch was an overweight lab mutt. But Mike's not biting. He tells me they, someone in America, a secret government agency, have crashed spaceships and dead aliens in hangars. Some, it seems, I press for detail, atrophied and elongated in limb. Others tiny with bulbous Mekon brain boxes, and of all manner of sightings and signals and lights and craft. That some believe Bigfoots and Sasquatches are behind the dead kine, hunched and hairy beings with red burning eyes, deplaned from flying saucers by the aliens, to what purpose he and no one knows. I take this in stride, albeit a big one. We thrill to the fantastical, the dinosaur, the creature that ever stalks in the imagination. We want it to escape. We want to believe it's alive. We need the prickle on the neck to remind us we are. He's drawing a trilobite. That's what I tell him it is. When he describes he's drawing a big spiral, like a snail that lived in the sea. He's not tracing, he's quick to add. It's important to him to have me know he's really drawing at my hand and eye. And I'm warmed by the pride, the wonder in his striving. But why does he tell me arches like those in a church are difficult, that eyes, noses, and mouths he finds the hardest, that he's tried a lady's face and a mermaid, a vista with a mountain? He has no one to tell this to, his day, his days. He's been there, home alone, among the sedimentary squalor of all he's accrued, drawing, a figment in the imagination of barely anyone but his own. He's copying a trilobite, a thing that once existed. I'd stumbled upon an online photography exhibit. There was a magnificent shot of a Siberian tiger on his hind legs, rubbing his impressive stripes full stretch against a tree. Another where the cameraman had to stand in water up to eye level for hours to finally get his lower than bird's eye view shot of some rare, dull waterfowl. And then there was the fish. It was just a pretty clownfish, orange and white and black, pale green reef salad behind it, all very Disney. But it wasn't until I read the first part of the accompanying caption that I was directed to notice the small black dots peeking from its open mouth. The image, I thought, had caught the last moments of some prey in that instant before it was swallowed alive, tiny eyes about to blink out. That suspended moment fascinated me. That heartbeat of time where existence, for all its worth, is all, where there's no going back and forward is nothingness, where everything is still with you, but no longer effectively matters. I felt for the little eyes, that perspective on the universe still spinning, or the cusp of extinction. It sent me back to read the rest of the caption. The picture wasn't what I thought it was at all. The victim was the swallowing fish. Apparently, there's something called an isopod, an order of aquatic louse. It looks like a woodlouse, that armored shape, inch long. This thing enters a fish through the gills, changes sex, grows legs, attaches itself to the base of the fish's tongue. It's parasitic. It sucks blood until the tongue withers and falls off. Then it lives there, attached to the stump. So it shouldn't be cat got your tongue, but the louse, the isopod, did. And these things are real. People have found them inside fish mouths at the supermarket and not been happy. You like fresh fish, I'd better not tell you that. So, scary clownfish. And the host fish, it's believed by creatures who left the seas a long time ago, isn't harmed. But I demur. What is it to lose an organ and sense 5 pairs of appendages wriggling in your mouth? Fish can't be psychologically traumatized? Maybe phantom tongue syndrome should be a thing. In my finny-eyed view, fish are candidates for therapy. There are certainly a lot of dead, open fish mouths in your therapy group. But then our ways of engaging with mental trauma are, well, lousy. Who or what are we when our tongue isn't our own? So I'll end here. Sometimes we, you and I, but mostly me, talking of the social swirl of events around us, all that fills a life with the largely insignificant, can't remember a name and say thing and thing, and without any other hints, we know exactly which couple we're talking about. Or not thing and thing, the other things, one of us will rave, and the other will get it in a beat. Or upping the ante, when I've just taken my liquid B12 and I'm holding it under the tongue for way longer than the 30 seconds I'm supposed to before swallowing, as if that makes it more effective and me more Biobab immortal. Or I'm just doing it so I can make garbled noises at you and not have to answer whatever question or pronouncement you're certain to make, because you know I can't answer, and or are pretending to take advantage of my inability to veto. Or I need to indicate to you not to move the thing you're moving. You're throwing out my 20-year-old herb containers by executive fiat, but this is dictatorship in action. Or you're moving the broken plant pot shards covering dirt I left on the kitchen counter because I had an inexplicable Mr. Fix-It moment in which I'm going to wash prior to one day gluing, if the mood returns. Or you have removed and probably thrown away another pair of my athletic socks that you claim are disgusting and more holes than sock, but I see as the kind of frugality that counterbalances the moral vacuum of your spendthrift ways. Or you're disappearing, again, dictatorial, bossy pant behavior, my pile of waste paper as you see it, but which to me is a delicately poised, totally coherent, very important pile of documents that I don't want to deal with for ineffable reasons, but I at least know where everything is in it, if I ever need it. And try saying any of that without words. Farcical pantomime is loosed. I'll grunt unintelligible phonemes without being able to open my mouth and mime like a bad clown. And my acting will be off the wall, incomprehensible, with increasingly frantic grunts and head shaking and moans of exasperation and squeaks of desperate encouragement as you get hotter. Or I try to erase something you guessed that's off track and back up your runaway trains of association to where you were heading in the right direction, all without being able to say more than and the associative link is something only a mind like mine would come up with, and you will guess even dumber things that will crack us both up, and we go on. Yet after a risible sequence of rapid fire absurdity, you'll nail it. You'll nail it absolutely right, as if we just tapped into a wavelength only we can hear. We laugh and laugh and laugh. And what it is or isn't then in those moments just doesn't matter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peter. I've put in the chat some information that Peter's next session of Pure Critique, his class that he teaches at the Hudson Valley Writers Center, will be starting again on August 12th. So don't forget to sign up for that if you're interested in working with Peter. Thank you so much. So now we're going to hear from Beth Hahn. A lot of the students are here in the audience to hear their teachers, so thank you all for coming. Beth Hahn is the author of the novel The Singing Bone from 2016. Her short fiction and essays have appeared in Craft, Literary, Necessary Fiction, the Platypus Press short series, Mr. Beller's Neighborhood, and others. She's attended the Breadloaf Writers Conference and was in residence at Ragdale and the Wellstone Center in the Redwoods. She has been teaching at the Hudson Valley Writers Center since 2016. And as her students know, she has wonderful success at helping her students get their work published. And she is such a great cheerleader to them and for them. And please take a class with her if you're interested in getting some of your short stories published. Help me welcome Beth Hahn.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Jennifer, for that introduction. I started writing a series of new stories over the course of the pandemic, and this one's brand new. I just finished it like last week, so first reading. Please use in the event of my death. My friend Florence was one of those therapists who did past life regression. She told me about it over drinks at O'Rourke's. We'd gone early, and the bar had that cool underwater feel dark spaces get on long summer afternoons. Florence told me that a past life was a shape of an inner world, something pure and instinct-driven. This was the summer of the UFO wave, and I was prepared to consider that shape, to imagine it pressing at the base of my throat, or to feel its weight at my side. Florence's fair hair was cut high at the nape of her neck and ran in a downward line to her chin, where it curled slightly, as if she were in the habit of tucking it behind her ears, which she was. Florence was following the UFO sightings by visiting a chemist on the corner of 85th and Lex, who had a shortwave radio set up in the back of his shop. Reality is anamorphosic, she said. The way we see changes depending on how and when we're looking. When I told my boyfriend about Florence, the chemist, and the shortwave, he asked more questions about Florence than he did the UFOs. I told him the color of her hair and that she worked as a therapist, but I didn't mention past lives. I didn't want to risk the small joke that I sensed would follow. It was Florence who'd suggested O'Rourke's. We'd met at the laundry room in our building, and while we waited for dryers, we sat cross-legged on the folding tables and gossiped about the super and other tenants until Florence said we should go get a drink. Soon it was a regular thing. Even if I hadn't liked Florence so much, I still would have been happy for her company. I hated the trip to the laundry room. The elevator shuddered when it got to the basement, and there was always a moment before the doors opened that I was sure I would get stuck. A series of bomb shelter gray hallways wound past garbage bins and cages where tenants kept bicycles, luggage, discarded furniture. The whole place smelled of trash, damp stone, and sorrow. I didn't know many people in New York then. I was working as an assistant at a small publishing house near the Flatiron Building. I never had enough money, and I only had the job because my aunt worked in the financial division of the publishing house. I imagine Florence's clients trusted her. A lot of people talk about themselves right off without being asked questions, which is more like a presentation than a conversation. But Florence wasn't like that. At O'Rourke's, she asked about my life, and I told her I wanted to leave a mark of myself on the world. Not in the form of a child or a name on a grave, but to imprint myself in some way. This surprised me, as it wasn't something I'd ever said aloud, and I waited for her to smile or laugh, but she didn't. Instead, she bought me another drink and lifted her glass. 2 imprints, she said. After my second drink, I told her that my boyfriend was a photographer for an international news agency. He always wanted to know my fantasies and thought I was lying when I said I didn't really have any. If pressed, I said, this is my fantasy, just as we are. Once, when we were in bed, he told me that if I were famous when I died, the newspaper would only want photos of me now, even if I lived to be a very old woman. I rolled on my back and looked at the ceiling, which had one of those ugly chandeliers you find in quickly rehabbed rentals. It was 2 black squares hinged together, and it was supposed to look like a modern sculpture. There was a cheap black chain snaking away and down the wall. To this day, I think it was the ugliest chandelier I've ever seen. When I told Florence what my boyfriend said, she made a face like she'd swallowed a rat's tail. And the next day, we went to a place in Midtown to buy Polaroid cameras. Walking back uptown, we stopped now and then to snap photos. I'll take a photo of you every year on your birthday, she promised. We sat on a bench by the park and waited for our images to appear on the exposed film, and I asked Florence how past life regression worked. She said she instructed her clients to move backward through a series of doors. The doors swung open without being touched, and each time a door opened, a white light formed and something else about a past life was revealed. That was when I asked Florence to take me through the doors. The moment I told her about wanting to leave an imprint, I felt the thought had haunted me all my life. Maybe it was something I yearned for in a time I could not recall. I remember staring at my face in the photograph as I talked. I don't know what I said to convince her, because at first she hesitated, but as I spoke, I could sense her softening. We agreed on a day, and I was to prepare by writing dreams down for 2 weeks. Florence explained that it helped open the doors. I dreamed as often as I did not. I felt a poor subject, but Florence only said, Let's see what happens. Florence's office was the size of a large closet and occupied a corner of the first floor of a residential building near the chemist shop. She'd painted the walls slate blue and hung a series of delicate spherical ink drawings. The Venetian blinds were slatted downwards, and the hush of a white noise machine made me want to curl up on the tufted gray daybed and fall asleep. I could feel the stony vibration of the subway in my body as it passed many stories below us. I closed my eyes. Moving through the doors was like leaving the planet. I saw the light Florence had mentioned, a beautiful diluted light. It was as if I were in a white tent pitched in a field of snow, the sky pale. I was outside of everything and at the same time inside my body, which was the tent. I sensed its impermanence, its willingness to arrive and depart. It was ethereal and lovely, but when I got to the last door, something shifted. I wanted to come out of my trance, but I had no way to tell Florence, even though I was tethered to her voice. I found myself falling towards a vast black lake. The shores were empty, the lake was deep, and just before I hit the surface, I woke up. "Are you all right?" Florence asked. She was kneeling in front of me, her face crooked with concern. "Yes," I said to her, even though everything around me felt like artifice and stage set, flattened and unfamiliar. "You called out." "Did I? I don't remember." I didn't want to disappoint Florence, so I didn't tell her about what I'd seen, but from then on, whenever I had that terrible sensation of falling just before sleep, I knew the water was beneath me, and I felt different. I went on with my life as usual, but I worried more. I began to bite my nails. Soon after, everything changed for Florence. One of her clients died while under hypnosis. Florence didn't lose her license or anything like that. The woman had a heart condition. It wasn't Florence's fault. I read the news on the subway platform, and with one hand over my heart, all day at work, I kept taking the newspaper out of my bag and rereading the article until my hands, sweating, were dirty with ink. I left work and went to Florence's apartment and knocked on her door, and though I was sure she was inside, she never came out. When I ran into the super a few weeks later, he said Florence had moved. She hadn't even left a forwarding address. She'd left all of her things too, as if she'd just packed a bag for an overnight trip and then decided not to come back. The super was going to move it all down to one of the cages in the basement as a kindness to her. One day, I went to the chemist to inquire after her. He hadn't seen Florence since she'd moved, but she had come by to say goodbye to him. It turned out they'd had a relationship, and I wondered why Florence had never added that detail. He was just closing, but asked if I'd like to listen to the shortwave. There had been a lot of activity lately, especially over the Hudson. I sat with him in the back room, which smelled of disinfectant and pill dust, listening for a sign from the universe. I took the chemist's hand in mine. At first he pulled away a little, but then he realized I only wanted connection, and he gripped my hand more tightly. I tried to imagine what the aliens saw when they looked down at us. Our swarming, teeming madness, our fleshy transience, our diminishing strength. I dropped in on the chemist now and then to see if he'd heard from Florence, whom he called Flo, which seemed wrong. But when I met my husband, I left off. By then, I guessed Florence would never come back, and like everyone else, I was losing interest in UFOs. I met my husband in the park while reading my first assigned manuscript. He was sitting nearby with his friends. He came over and asked if I would like to take a walk with him, just to the fountain and back. He pointed toward the sculpture of the angel, the one atop the fountain who looks to be perpetually arriving, her wings arched, her robes whirled, her hand outstretched. I shielded my eyes from the sun and looked up at him. His black hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and he wore a colorful print shirt with a wide collar. "All right," I said, smiling, "just to the fountain and back." I put the manuscript in my satchel and stood. He asked my name, and because I didn't know him, I lied and said it was Florence. When we reached the fountain, we sat down on the edge, and I put my hand in and stirred the water. The more we talked, the more I felt I already knew him. You know, I said, my name's not really Florence. What is it then? I wrote it down on a scrap of paper with my telephone number and handed it to him. What a pretty name, he said, looking at the paper. I broke up with the photographer that night, and my husband and I cut our trajectories through the city together. When I got pregnant, we moved here to the salt box on a green quarter-acre in Connecticut and had our daughter. We tried for more children, but they never arrived. These events made us unhappy sometimes, I admit, but who is happy all of the time? We were in this together, I knew, and it made us more grateful for what we did have. I was aware, though, of a keening, almost unbearable love for my husband and daughter. The thought of losing them terrified me so much it affected my behavior. I took 2 pills for anxiety every morning, and in an attempt to sweat the fear away, advanced through various exercise classes. I wished I had a friend like Florence to talk to, but then I realized I hadn't seen Florence in years. When my husband was diagnosed with his illness, I had the sensation of falling before sleep, even though I was wide awake. We'd just done a battery of tests at the hospital, and my husband was pale, his silver hair thinning, but he was so solid and as kind as ever. I leaned against the glass wall in the hospital's atrium until my head cleared. He brought me a sugary drink from a vending machine, but I knew the black water was waiting outside, just below the street, where I couldn't see it, rushing and pumping. And I was right. First, it came to his ankles with the diagnosis, then to his knees when his appetite diminished. And soon enough, the water was above his head, and then he was gone, gasping for breath, dragged away like so much tender marsh grass. At Christmas, my daughter visited and suggested I move out to Arizona to be closer to her and the baby. I agreed, and since then, I've been cleaning and packing. I found the Polaroid camera and the pictures Florence and I took together in a box in the attic. The photographs have that old-fashioned, oversaturated color that only instant camera film can capture on a summer afternoon. We look like girls, younger than my own daughter, and we're laughing, mugging for the camera. Now and then, I've looked for Florence online, but I always find the same series of articles about the woman who died of a heart attack in Florence's office. There is nothing about Florence, which means Florence may no longer be here. It's perfectly possible, and it would explain a lot. In the end, there are no records of most people's lives, and there may not be one of mine either. I turned the camera over and over in my hands, wondering if anyone still made film for it. I checked online, and the film arrived a few days later in long silver packets. I ordered 3 boxes, just in case I live for a long time or make many mistakes aiming the camera. This was the right decision, as most of my photographs only captured the top of my head, and the flash cubes blasted away all detail until I removed them and turned a light towards my face instead. After we got the cameras, Florence and I went to a stationer's and had stamps made. And I'd forgotten that until I found mine in the box. The stamp is the sort that looks official, with its own ink and a metal spring handle. It comes down with a thud like a heavy stapler, the letters catching the ink as it goes. I made a mess with the re-inking, but I was pleased with the result. The stamp reads, "Please use in the event of my death," and I slammed it into the photo's frame, into the wide white space below my face. It's not a flattering photograph, but it is honest. I look as if I've just woken up, my face puffy and pale, and the room behind me dark with the shapes of packed boxes and closed curtains. I was here, and so was Florence, and so are you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beth. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
It was so great to hear you read again. Okay, so now we're going to hear Jonathan Vatner. Jonathan Vatner is the author of the 2019 novel Carnegie Hill, praised by People magazine, Town and Country, and the New York Post. He is an award-winning journalist who has written for the New York Times, the Oprah magazine, and Poets and Writers. He is the managing editor of Chiu, the magazine of the Fashion Institute of Technology. He holds an MFA in creative writing from Sarah Lawrence College and a BA in cognitive neuroscience from Harvard University. He teaches fiction writing at NYU. His second novel, The Bridesmaids Union, is forthcoming from St. Martin's Press in June 2022. He lives in Yonkers, New York with his husband and cats and is zooming in from Cape Cod right now. Please help me welcome Jonathan Vatner.
Thank you, Jennifer. Peter and Beth, thank you for sharing those pieces. Really, really beautiful. So I'm going to read something a little more comical. It's the beginning of my next novel, The Bridesmaids Union, which is about an online support group for bridesmaids who sort of have the most thankless and challenging job and unpaid job there is in our culture. I actually wrote the novel sort of on assignment. My editors had seen an article about a bride who was charging her guests more than $1,000 each to attend her wedding. And she just got like creamed on social media. And so my editors wanted me to write a novel about, quote unquote, the online trend of wedding shaming. And I was so surprised to have an assignment. I thought it would be kind of a fun challenge, and it was interesting. And the challenge was to kind of take that, but to kind of make it my own and to write something that was somewhat literary and not sexist, which was hard given sort of all the sexism related to kind of wedding culture online. So I hope I succeeded. I'm just going to read from the beginning, and then there'll be sort of a break, and then I'll read the end of the first chapter. Iris arrived at Amber and John John's wedding venue, a genteel estate on the outskirts of Miami, an hour before her hair and makeup slot, carrying her seafoam bridesmaid dress and matching sandals, a box of tea lights, and a fat envelope of programs, which she had individually tea-stained and bound with twine. In the rose garden, a perfumed breeze enhanced every view like a gauzy Instagram filter. Peach climbing roses twisted around the wrought iron wedding arch, presiding over twin flanks of gleaming white folding chairs. The terraced lawn stepped gracefully toward the bay, spangled in the afternoon sun. Such breathtaking beauty pricked Iris in a tender place, as it reminded her of her own wedding, scrapped 6 years earlier. She tried not to think about Forrest on Amber's special day. Weddings were a kind of reunion for married couples, a pep rally for the rite and covenant of marriage, but they demanded a reckoning of single people, and it was impossible not to think back with regret. In the courtyard, girded with slender fluted columns, event staff arranged banquet rounds in staggered rows. Iris stepped into the cloister and deposited the tea lights next to the tablecloths wrapped in butcher paper and the trays of dishes and glassware stacked in modernist towers. She glanced around. Where were the centerpieces? The event planner rushed toward her with panic in her eyes. Iris, right? Maid of honor? Iris nodded. We have a problem. The florist went bankrupt. I just found out. We don't have centerpieces. The wedding started in 3 hours. You must know another florist. Maybe they can give us some pre-made arrangements? The event planner shook her head. I called all my contacts. No one has that many flowers on hand. A better event planner would have confirmed with all the vendors the week of the wedding, but this woman had come free with a venue. Anyway, there wasn't time for assigning blame. There wasn't time for a stray thought. Iris took a deep breath. She could handle this. Have you told Amber? The event planner shook her head. I didn't want to disturb her unless it was absolutely necessary. Iris looked around, trying to recall centerpieces from past weddings. Not all of them had been floral. There had been candles floating with water and vases filled with lemons. At a college friend's wedding, painted wooden blocks became risers for displaying the platters of food served family style. Her gaze settled on the ocean, and she had an idea. She texted the other bridesmaids and tore off 3 black garbage bags from a roll. Amber and Iris's mutual friend Sophia, who was getting married in September, appeared a minute later, and they picked their way down the rocky path to the beach. Into one bag, they placed all the pretty stones they could find. Into the second, unbroken shells. They filled the third with as much sand as they could carry. In the damp heat, the beached seaweed stank of dead fish. Iris was sodden with perspiration, and her hair reached maximum frizz. Iris, Sophia, and the event planner used serving spoons to scoop sand onto the middle of the tables, then planted stones, shells, and tea lights into the piles. Iris had purchased the candles to edge the courtyard as night fell, but this was more important. The sand drifts could pass as centerpieces, and they didn't smell, but they looked more haphazard than Iris had anticipated. At the craft store the day before, she had seen dried starfish in neon hues. Without a second thought, she and Sophia jumped into her rental car and cleaned out the shelves in a supermarket sweep frenzy. In the giddy dash toward the register, Iris tossed in sheets of silver netting with a maritime vibe and another box of tea lights for the courtyard walkways. The pop of color and texture elevated the sand into gorgeous artistic centerpieces. "This is boss," Sophia said. "Amber doesn't know how lucky she is to have you." "She would have done the same thing for me," Iris said, flooded with relief and excitement. Amber was going to love them. Once Iris was dressed, braided, and painted, she slipped into the bridal suite where Amber perched on the edge of a rococo armchair, answering text messages as the makeup artist dabbed at her face. Her hair was done up like a chandelier, and her dress, a sheath of white silk lace, pooled at her feet. 4 years living in Miami had darkened her skin and lightened her hair, and she looked radiant. "Hey, friend," Iris said. "How's your last hour of singlehood treating you?" "I'm starving," Amber said without looking up. "Everyone tells you not to skip breakfast, but I was afraid the food baby would show in the dress." Iris found a tray of pretzel sticks in her purse. Motherhood had transformed her into a mobile snack bar. To keep crumbs off the wedding dress, she snapped the sticks in half before placing them in Amber's mouth as if giving communion. "I need to tell you something," Iris said. "Everything is fine, but there's been a change of plans with the centerpieces." "Could you blend that a bit more?" Amber asked the makeup artist. "It's looking a little clowny." "The florist no-showed," Iris continued. "So Sophia and I improvised new centerpieces with a beachy theme. I think you're going to love them. I just didn't want you to be surprised." "Shit," Amber said, staring at her phone. "My dad thinks he's too good for the GPS, and now he's halfway to Palm fucking Beach." Iris was taken aback. This was not the Amber she knew. Real Amber would have kept calm while letting her brother deal with their irresponsible father. Real Amber would have eaten breakfast. "Let me talk to him," Iris said, reaching for Amber's phone. "So it's okay about the centerpieces, sand, not flowers?" "Sure, whatever you think is best." Amber stared into the mirror. Iris needed to let this go. Amber clearly was too overwhelmed to think about centerpieces. Maybe when she saw them, she would realize what a huge feat Iris and Sophia had pulled off. On the flight home the next afternoon, Iris gazed out the window at the nubby carpet of clouds and the metallic sky. The wedding had been flawless, but was it petty to dwell on this? Amber hadn't acknowledged the replacement centerpieces. Those sandy mounds were pure inspiration, and it stung that Iris's whirlwind save had been ignored. Of course, the wedding wasn't about her. She just couldn't help feeling erased. At the farewell brunch that morning, Iris had joked that she should start a career as a centerpiece designer. Amber laughed politely and turned away. Iris and Amber had been litter mates, growing up on the same block in Tenafly, New Jersey. Amber had always been gracious and generous, considerate and composed. In high school, she went out of her way to ensure that no one felt left out, and she sent a thank you note to Iris's parents every time they had her over for dinner. But as her wedding approached, she became self-absorbed and demanding and treated her bridesmaids like hired help. Iris wouldn't have believed it possible for a person to change so radically if she hadn't witnessed it more times than she could count. Weddings were a perfect storm of anxiety and scrutiny, and no bride was immune. Nor were the grooms, as Forrest had proven. Iris turned to Sophia, watching a Dance Moms marathon on the screen in the seat back. Random question, but did Amber acknowledge our centerpieces? Sophia plucked out one earbud. No, she didn't thank you? Iris shook her head. You must be pissed. That wedding would have sucked without you. I'm disappointed, Iris said. She didn't get angry the way most people did, popping off at the slightest insult. There was too much anger in the world and not enough understanding. I mean, I could see she was stressed. She did yell at me for changing out of those heinous sandals when a strap broke. The sandals had been Amber's gift to her bridesmaids. Iris wouldn't have called them heinous, though they were too costumey to wear again. As a gift, they had been a little misguided, a little perfunctory, a little dismissive of the labor her bridesmaids had put into the wedding. Wow, yeah, they didn't seem very sturdy. Now I can't sell them, Sophia said. You can sell mine. That's really sweet of you. Sophia sounded so genuine that Iris snorted her water and started hacking. But Iris's joy was tinged with sadness. She'd formed close friendships when she was younger, but being a single parent made it impossible to sustain them. The other preschool moms were all smiles at drop-off and pickup, but they never stuck around to chat, and her coworkers were a definite no. Her life was her terrible job, her wonderful son, and her difficult parents. She hadn't had a real conversation with either of her sisters in months. Okay, so I'm going to skip a short section where Iris gets picked up by her dad, and they have dinner, and he drops Iris and Mason, her son, off at home, and she puts her son to bed. That's a lot that happens very quickly. Sophia had already sent an email with the subject line, "Final stretch." It was a list of bridesmaids assignments for her September wedding. Would Iris mind heading up the gift sitch? In other words, soliciting giveaways from local businesses, ordering custom favors, and stuffing all 200 bags. In Iris's opinion, gift bags should be optional. No one went to a wedding for the swag. She had already volunteered to embellish the masquerade masks for the photo booth, and she wasn't even maid of honor. Sophia's sister was. Exhaustion pulled Iris deeper into the sofa. She'd been in at least one wedding per year for the past 5 years. And who knew who might get married after Sophia? The $20,000 she'd spent on bridesmaiding had piled up so much credit card debt, she couldn't bear to think about it. As much as she loved weddings, the comforting formality, the beauty, the joy of the betrothed, being a bridesmaid was sucking her dry. Sure, she didn't have to accept every invitation, but it never seemed okay to turn them down. She hit reply and wrote, "Absolutely, so excited for your big day." She needed to vent. It didn't feel right to gossip about Amber and Sophia to any of their mutual friends, and she couldn't imagine calling her sisters to complain. As she stared at her phone, a thought occurred to her. An online community of bridesmaids might understand the frustration of saving your best friend's wedding without her acknowledging your work, or receiving flimsy sandals as a bridesmaid present, or being asked to rustle up needless parting gifts. Iris Googled bridesmaid horror stories and found an article recapping the most egregious situations from a subgroup on Reddit. According to one bridesmaid, the bride had asked her to lose 10 pounds before the wedding. Another had learned calligraphy and handwritten all the table cards, only to discover at the wedding that the perfectionist bride had hired a professional to redo them all. A third caught the groom kissing his best man. Reading these posts, she felt understood. She refilled her wine glass and navigated to the original Reddit page. She created an anonymous account and began to write. Okay, so my best friend got married this weekend and I was MOH. The florist in charge of the centerpieces no-showed, so my co-bridesmaid and I improvised new centerpieces in literally an hour, and that included ransacking a Michael's. Also, not to brag or anything, well, maybe to brag, I performed all of the following bridesmaidly duties. A, fed the bride by hand to keep her from passing out. B, got the caterer to set out snacks before the ceremony to proactively absorb alcohol and curb drunkenness. C, distracted the bride's busybody in-laws before she walked down the aisle. D, single-handedly bustled the wedding dress, which involved lining up 18 loops with buttons at the waist. And E, executed a game of Twister to keep the dress clean when the bride had to pee. That was some peak bridesmaid shit right there. I am all about helping within an inch of my life, but a little gratitude would have been nice. The bride is my best friend, and she didn't thank me once. Iris attached a photo of one of the centerpieces and reread her post. She liked how she sounded, bolder and more honest than in real life, like someone who could command an audience, who could speak truth to bad behavior, like someone she would never be. Thank you.
That was great, Jonathan. So funny. I cannot wait until your book comes out, and we'll have to have you back to do a reading, hopefully in real
Thanks.
life.
I would love that.
At
Yeah,
the center.
appreciate that.
I'm muted. Thank you so much. Okay, now we have Christina Chiu. She is the grand prize winner of the James Allen McPherson Award for her novel Beauty. She's also the author of Troublemaker and Other Saints. Troublemaker was alternate selection for BOMC and QPB, a nominee for their first fiction award and winner of the Asian American Literary Award. She's published in magazines and anthologies, including Tin House, Charlie Chan is Dead Too, Not the Only One, Washington Square, Worldwide Writers, The MacGuffin, the Asian Pacific American Journal, Grandmothers, Granddaughters, Remember, and Not the Only One. Her stories have won awards and honorable mention in literary contests such as Playboy, Glimmer Train, New Millennium, New York Stories, Worldwide Writers, Explorations, and El Dorado Writers Guild. She is the recipient of the Robert Simpson Fellowship, the alternate selection of the Book of the Month Club. She won the New Stone Circle Fiction Contest and second place in the Playboy Fiction Contest, and was nominated for the Stephen Crane First Fiction Award. Please help me welcome Christina Chiu.
Okay, so thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm like, did I send that to you? Because that's crazy. I really appreciate all of you guys being here tonight. And it's funny because I used to live in Westchester, and in fact, I grew up there. I grew up in Edgemont, and I taught for many years at Hudson Valley Writers Center, like on a weekly basis. It wasn't until I had kids that I was like, can't do this anymore. So thanks to Peter, Beth, and Jonathan. That was hilarious. And it's been really wonderful reading with you guys. It's always so fun being with your community and being with other people who care about writing and reading. And it's just like the one saving grace of COVID that we've been able to still communicate this way. So thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Sophia, and thank you, Hudson Valley Writers Center. I will be teaching in October, and I was thinking I would teach about details and telling details. It's kind of interesting because people understand what a metaphor is, but they don't actually understand how to do it, right? Like, how do you figure out what a metaphor is for your story, right? Like, it's like hard. But if you focus on details that are relevant to the protagonist, you come away with a lot of information that the reader will want to see. So I'm just going to read a chapter from my recent novel, Beauty. And it is, I guess you'd say the book is like, covers the arc of this woman's life. So the second chapter, she's 16, but the book goes until she's in her 80s. I'm going to read from Bootman. Black boots, there in the window. Could they really be lace? Wow. Floral and paisley drops, open-toed, trimmed with leather, knee-high. They go perfect with my strapless dress. Sexy, yet delicate, a smidgen of the masculine. Is it Dolce & Gabbana? No. Judging from the pencil-thin heels, Jimmy Choo. Yes. No. Maybe? Heat rises off the pavement. The sidewalk rumbles. Steam rising through the grill. Bodies rush up from the subway. I press against the glass as people brush past. Could they be Chloe? It's hard to say. Everything's in the details, and it's already a little too dark to tell. Is Ma gone for good, I wonder? When I was little, we used to go to Chinatown to watch the Chinese double feature. It was always packed, hot, full of cigarette smoke, and with the cracking sound of people snacking on watermelon seeds. One time, Georgie and I got into a fight. Ma hushed us, then passed me over to Dad. His lap was soft, squishy. I leaned against him. It was hot, but in a good way. Go to sleep, Dad said, pressing my head to his chest. But I'm not tired, I said. Dad tried to give me back to Ma. Doesn't she need a nap? You're welcome to tell her that, Ma said. You take her. No, you take her. Back and forth I went. Neither wanted me then. Neither wants me now. Suddenly, I feel something. Someone's watching. I look past the display. The sales guy. He comes toward me, his gaze like a magnet. His eyes are pale blue, his hair dark brown and spiked at the top. Try them, he mouths, and I get a rush like the boots are already mine. The store has the delicious smell of new leather and shoe polish, also spicy, sweet fragrance. The walls are the kind of lavender you want to wrap yourself around and sleep inside. At the register, a saleswoman rings up a customer with a shivering chihuahua in her purse. They're either Jimmy Choo's or Dolce, I say about the boots, or maybe Chloe. Impressive, he says. You know your shoes, but you're wrong. How? Don't take it to heart, beautiful. He tells me it's a new Italian designer. He eyeballs my gladiator sandals. 6, he asks. Wow, you're good, I say. That I am, and not just about shoes. He points me to an oversized, squishy sofa in the far corner of the store. I sink into the soft, velvety chair. Air squeaks from its seams. It feels like lying on a bed of clouds. He disappears to the back, and when the red velvet curtain pushes aside, I make out the floor-to-ceiling shelf stocked with Prada boot boxes. I picture myself in the middle of the room, surrounded by pretty shoes. Wisps of cool air sweep over my skin. Goosebumps. The woman with the chihuahua leaves. Her salesperson withdraws a purse from a cabinet. She peeks behind the curtain and tells my guy she's taking off. He mutters something I can't hear, but she okays him and heads out the door. On the way out, she draws the gate a third of the way down so people know the shop's closed. The track light dims. My guy returns with an oversized silver box. He extends a hand and helps me out of the deep chair He removes the lid of the box, revealing tissue paper with my boots tucked like a perfect gift inside, and then carefully removes the soft cardboard. I slip off my sandals and reach an arm into the smooth, almost silky boot leg. It gives me a dull heartache. Bootman kneels, slips the boot on. Then he leans in. One hand cups my calf, clasping the upper sides of the boot together. The other hand zips. The lace mesh makes it feel snug and sturdy, while the lining reminds me of a silk slip. I hand him the other boot and he sets me up. He smooths his hands up and down the backs of his boots, then slides them to the bare insides of my knees. I rock on the soles, the front of my skirt brushing the spikes of his gelled hair. He squeezes the sides of my foot and presses a thumb at my big toes. He moves so close, I feel the warmth of his breath at my thighs. What a good fit, he says. I check the mirror. You think? Oh yeah, he pats my ass. Now walk for me, he says. I swish my way to the mirror, then right, then left. The books make me taller and thinner. They're magic. God, you really are beautiful, he says, leaning his weight onto his heels. You do know that, don't you? He asks. Heat rushes to my cheeks. Beautiful. No one has ever called me that. People sometimes say pretty or fashionable. Sometimes they even say I'm like Ma. Nolly, not at all, Ma always insists. How much, I ask him. $12.50, he says, not including tax. Ugh. I have a credit card for emergencies, but it's capped at 1,000. I sink into the chair. Air squeaks again from its seams. Oh well. You mean to tell me you're gonna let these go, he says? Guess so, I shrug. Oh, beautiful, he says, running his hands up my legs and resting his palms over my knees. Don't pout, please don't pout. I can't help it, I say. You're killing me, he says. He glances at his watch. I must be crazy, but... Yeah? I yelp, hugging him so tight he nearly falls onto me. Hold on there. I can't give it free, he says. It's still going to cost you. I know, I say. I know. He hovers there for a moment. His breath smells like scope. What's your name, he asks. Georgie, I lie. Tell me, Georgie, he says, his hands slide upward, his thumbs nestling in the crook of my hips. What are you, 15? No, I'm 20, I say, which is my sister Georgie's age. 20, he says. Yeah, like I'm a med student. Every day it's like study, you know? You Asian girls sure do look young, he laughs. He tucks the box lid under his arm. This is torn. I'll find another. Just give me a couple minutes. I relax into the chair. The velvet fabric feels cool against my skin. As cars and trucks drive past in the street outside, shadows shift and change over the ceiling. Georgie will be off her shift at the hospital soon. With my suitcase in the middle of the apartment, she's going to need an explanation I'm not sure how to give. Yeah, Ma dumped me here, I'll say. Why? Well, Dad sort of hooked up with some woman in Hong Kong, and now, well, Mom's on a plane to drag him back? He's old, that woman said. He deserves a few years of happiness. Maybe all this is my fault. Maybe none of this would be happening if only I was smart like Georgie. The store suddenly seems too quiet. Hello, I call. I peek into the stockroom. What a shocker. It's not much larger than Mom's walk-in closet. The floor is cement mouse gray. Aside from the shelves in the line of sight behind the curtain, no other shelves exist. Just boxes stacked 7 feet high. In the middle of the ceiling, there's one single bare bulb. Bootman's hunched over a step stool, elbows to his knees. Next to him on the floor is a sneaker-sized box. In his hands, a half-empty bottle of soda. Oh, beautiful, he says. He seems surprised to see me. I've been waiting, I say. I'm sorry, he says. He scoots to the floor and indicates with a wave of the hand to take a seat. I got caught up in my thoughts. That ever happened to you? Why don't you do us all a favor and release him, that woman told Mom. I nod, feel myself start to cry. My, what's so dark and heavy inside this pretty little head of yours, he asks, brushing the tears away with his thumbs. Go ahead, you can tell me. It's like a hand squeezes my heart and a knot of pain rises to my throat. Who are you? I ask. My name, he asks. Call me In Love. No, really. He gulps his soda as if it were beer, even swallows as if it burns going down. Who do you think I am? He says. You're Bootman. I like that, he says. He hands me the box. Here, open it. A matching bag. For me? All for you, beautiful, he says. Now I'm your everything man. I start to sob. He kisses me with his hand at the back of my neck. He holds me there. When I pull away, I see the bulge inside his pants. He unbuttons his shirt. He does it steadily, no rush. Gray hairs and a pot belly. He drapes his shirt over the floor and helps me onto it. He creeps up, kissing my shin, knee, thigh. He bunches my skirt to my hips. My fingernails dig into his shirt and the cement floor. I stare up at the bulb until my eyes hurt. When I shut my eyes, it's like the sun in the sky, only no warmth. Cold moves up from the floor, but his tongue runs along the seam of my underwear and my body flashes hot, making me shiver. Yes, beautiful. Oh, yes. I'm thinking it's lucky I'm wearing my favorite bikini underwear when his tongue sneaks into my panties. He bunches my skirt up and tugs the panties off. I tense up, lift my head. There's a clear line where skin has never seen day, a pale triangle of straggly black hair. Relax, he says. He tugs me forward, cups his hands beneath my ass. His tongue laps first slowly, then greedily. It's like I'm totally naked, even with my clothes on. He makes sounds like he's eating, and he likes what he tastes. The guy moongazer from school pops into my head. She's hot, he said about his girlfriend, but what a dead fish. Taste how good you are, Bootman says, sticking a finger inside me, then bringing it to my lips. No, thanks. He pushes his fingers into my mouth. The taste is a little sour, which is surprising, but definitely not like dead fish. I feel myself relax. He moves his tongue. It's like the waves from an ocean. There's a wet, warm, yummy itch, a tingling that expands, stretches to my fingers and toes. The more I feel, the more I want. In sex ed, we learned about the clitoris, but the teacher never mentioned the buzz, craving for more. He unzips his pants and his penis is as hard as a broom. There are penises in your body and you. None of the penises look like this. The tip of Bootman's penis is so brown, it's almost purple, and it's round, orb-like. Then it's like a shovel digging inside me, the feeling sharp and jagged like a sword up my spine. The feeling, the good one, disappears. Ow. He grabs my head with his hands and pulls me down, smothering my face in his chest. He bangs. The back of my head bangs against the cement. My shoulders scrape. The light bulb makes my eyes tear. Fang song. That in Chinese means don't resist. I give in to the pain. Think about Ma. Put myself there with her on the plane. See her crying, just crying. Bootman's throat catches. He stiffens and gasps. He releases my hair, his weight pinning me to the floor. The agony in his face gives way to an ecstatic smile. Then I'm sticky and wet. Wow, he says, pushing to his knees. Between my legs, there's a raw, burning sensation, but it doesn't stop the hungry itch that's still there. How can something suck so badly, yet leave you wanting more? That was incredible, he says, his eyes brimming with tears. You're incredible. I try to cover myself. That's when I see it, the splotch on his shirt. It's the size of my palm, dark, ruddy brown, like day-old blood. In European history, everyone laughed when the teacher said men welded locks onto their virgin brides. They wanted to be certain the woman stayed pure while they were away at war, their hymens intact. We laughed even harder when the sex ed teacher told us women weren't educated about menstruation. Some thought blood meant they were dying. But I'm informed, and I can say for a fact that it means exactly that. I'm dying. A part of me is lost forever. And while my virginity didn't mean anything while I had it, now it means everything because it's gone. He buries his face in the shirt and inhales the smell. Come back sometime, okay, he says. I want to grab that shirt and run, but it's too late. That spot, he'll take me home, keep that part of me there forever. And wherever I go, another part will always be here on that cement floor with the light burning through my eyelids, horrified, yet hungry for more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. Wow. Thank you. So powerful. Thank you all for your readings tonight. What a great event. And thank you to all the students who are here. We're going to have a brief Q&A, and you can put your questions in the chat, just type question. And if it's for all of them, you don't have to say that, but if it's in particular for one of them, please mention who we should direct the question to. We'll start off as you're writing your questions into the chat with what we tend to ask all of our writers who come to the series, just for students who are working on first novel or a first short story collection. If you could give a little bit of insight, basically your most salient advice that you would give to students who are working on their first collection. And that's for all of you.
Who wants to go first?
I think just revise, and think of it as part of the writing process, not as the extra task.
I think writing is a little bit like running a marathon, you know, like everyone's like trying to sprint, but like it's actually a marathon. So like if you sprint, you're like dead you can't even make it to the end. You know what I mean? So it's like you have to kind of pace yourself and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, that's my advice too, is just
Sorry.
like find a way to keep going. It always takes, like, you read a book, you could read a book in a day, but that book could have taken 5 or 10 years to write. And you just don't realize how long it's going to take. But it's, you know, for writers, it's pure pleasure. Or mostly pleasure, sometimes pain. But yeah, just find a way to commit to it and to keep doing it.
Yeah. Can't disagree with that. It's just keep going, keep writing, keep editing. Don't be happy with the first things you've got down. Be willing to kill the darlings. They get in there and they're so damn good. But sometimes you have to go back to them.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing, which is it really helps to have like a group of people who read your work and comment on it. At least it has helped me, and I know it helps many others. And I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that most of my writing group is in the audience right now, and they have been an integral part to making my novel what it is right now. So thank you.
And just to piggyback on that, I do think you need a class is really helpful. You get feedback regularly. You learn when you're helping others, and you find things that you can't see right away. And you also get a community of people to write for, and that's very important because writing is lonely.
Thank you for those answers. We have a new question in the chat from Philip F. Clark, who asks, what do you find as a first impetus to begin a story? Memory, character, image, event, some or all of these?
I can start. I think it depends on the story. There's fodder everywhere you go, right? Sometimes you hear people say things, you're like, oh my God, that's perfect. And it gives you an idea about a character, right? Or so, you know, this current book that I was reading from, initially it was a short story. And the short story happened because this was like many years ago, and I was sitting in a doctor's office, and I was sitting there for so long, and I was fuming mad because I was like, it was like over an hour, right? I'm sitting there waiting to go in, and I read the entire New York Magazine to the back. In the back, there was the personals, you know, they used to have those things, you know, and I had never noticed them before, but now I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And there was a personal that said, be Asian, be sweet. And I was just like, wow, like, what, oh my God, like who would put a personal, like, who would answer it? I mean, someone must answer it if people put them out there, right? So like, then my mind was going and going about this character. And I started writing this short story.
I've sometimes found a line has just propelled me. I once had a line that just had me writing the first paragraph. And at a certain point, I paused and I didn't know where I was going to go. And the next line was something to the effect of hearing the cat jump down from the table and making a noise, and a plane going overhead. And in that beat, I got the rest of the story all in one, which rarely happens. But I love a first line to take me in there.
My process usually begins with a person who I know, who I'm trying to kind of understand. And I kind of put them into fiction as a way of trying to like work through their mind. The Bridesmaids Union was not that, but that was inspired by like the tabloids. But, and, you know, and Bridesmaid, you know, websites and online groups. But yeah, usually it's about character. Peter, I'm curious to know how you like figure out how to juxtapose these pieces that might seem sort of disparate, but ultimately kind of weave together.
I cheated. I wrote the narrative out of these various threads that I'm working on now, and then I chopped them up because I didn't think that the where the piece was going could sustain going, you know, through a long section and then dropping that and going to another one. And it seemed to me that these things were sort of weaving, braiding, if you will. And what I tended to find was that this piece that I'm working on, I think it's working on me. What I found was it broke in very good. It was quite easy to break. And to juxtapose things, whether it would be a word or an image or a contrast, or it was often I'd had some aspect of theme or doubt or idea in one piece, and then I could see how that would somehow filter into another. So that gave me a breath, because there's one thing about breaking up a narrative and not allowing the chronology to take over. You can move around in time, and you don't have to exhaust a particular line of storytelling.
I often, this story I wanted to try to write into a mood, the mood of right now, without ever directly referencing anything about the present time, but it's just such an odd time, and I wondered how to do that in fiction. So that's what I've been playing with a lot in my stories since we've all been at home. But before that, it was always an image. I think I'd have some like kind of nagging image picture of something that I'd have to, it's like an itch almost, that I'd have to go figure out what it was and write about it.
That's really interesting, Beth, about trying to write about this time period and the pandemic without overtly discussing it in the piece. And I think that you did a really great job capturing that feeling that we're all grappling with right now. Just to open that question up to the rest of you, has your writing changed at all during the pandemic? And what are your feelings about overtly writing about it versus trying to do it more subtly and sideways the way Beth just did in that piece?
Well, I think for me, the biggest change hasn't been the writing so much as my mood, and just trying to, like, I have 2 kids and, you know, a 2-bedroom apartment, and, you know, it's like, I don't know if you saw, like when we first started, of course, my son came into the room, like, it's like the 1 hour, just 1 hour, can't I have 1 hour? Like, you know, and it's just maddening. And there's like no space to actually like think and, you know, do my own things. And it feels a little bit like jail, like, you know, my grandmother used to do this thing. If one of us did something wrong, we all had to kneel, right? Like all of us, like it didn't matter. And I feel like that's what's happening now. We all have to kneel. We all have to stay home. And it's just maddening, because I feel like at times, you know, what's the point in writing if we're just going to be stuck at home like this forever, you know? But yeah, but then I write.
For me, the pandemic has I guess the writing has helped me get through the pandemic. I don't know if my writing has changed that much. I think I was just kind of buckling down and hoping that this will end, and just the keeping going has kind of helped me move, has helped me keep going. But I actually am writing about, I'm planning on it. I'm planning on writing about the pandemic in my next novel. I'm like very literal, I think, as you may have noticed with my excerpt, like everything is concrete. So I'm actually writing literally about the pandemic. I'm interested in the anti-vax, anti-mask side and how it goes up with people who are actually very vulnerable. So stay tuned.
I can't wait. That sounds, I can't wait.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much for being here. This was such a treat to hear our wonderful teachers be able to read their work. Thank you to Peter for suggesting this reading to us. And thank you all for being a part of it, and the students for coming, the board members for coming, Jonathan's group for coming. So stay tuned for more from these incredible writers. Don't forget to support their books. Sophia has put everything in the chat, and tomorrow when she thanks you for coming, she'll have the links to Buy Beauty, as well as the other books by all of these people. So thank you for being here. Jonathan, enjoy your time in Cape Cod, enjoy your dinner, and thank you all for coming tonight. Don't forget to share this with other people who might be interested in taking classes with these great people. It will be up on YouTube in the next couple of days. Have a great night, and please come back for the next prose reading, which will be our last reading for the summer. And that will be 2 weeks from tonight. We'll have Paisley Rickdell and Carol Ajarian, and that will be an excellent conversation and reading. And mark your calendars for November 5th, the gala. Our prose people will be Melissa Phoebos and Garth Greenwell. we can't wait to welcome you back for that. Thank you all. Good night.
Thanks everyone for coming. Great to read with the three of
Thank
you.
you.
Lots of fun.